Hi and welcome to another Watch Geek video. Today we get to review one of my grails and one of the most underrated dive watches out there, the vintage 1970s Bulova Devil Diver. The nickname Devil Diver comes from a very sinister depth rating of 666 feet, or roughly 203 meters. Although this is not the first and certainly not the only Bulova dive watch with the same depth rating, as Bulova used it for almost 20 years on numerous models, the name gets mostly associated with this exact model. Introduced in 1968, it is just one of many completely original designs made by Bulova at the time, including the snorkel I reviewed. Most popular dive watches from that era and onwards can be accused of getting at least some inspiration from the likes of Rolex Submariner or Blancpain 50 Fathoms. But not this. This is one of the most original looking dive watches ever made, and is probably the biggest reason why I adore this piece. This also shows Bulova was a force to be reckoned with back then and a proper watchmaker. That last bit is why this watch is more than just a pretty face. It is made with quality in mind. The case is made by CBSA, a company that made cases for the Omega Moonwatch of the era. The unique dial is made by Singer, a company that made dials for the likes of Omega and Rolex, including the Daytona. Now you're thinking to yourself, but wait, they outsourced these parts and you call them a real watchmaker. Well, the fact is the Swiss industry has always worked that way, using outsourced components. What makes Bulova a real watchmaker is the fact they didn't outsource the most important part, the heart of the watch, the movement. So this is powered by an in-house made Bulova movement called 11 Black D. It is a 17-joule automatic mechanical movement with hand-winding ability that beats at 18,000 bph and comes with a date function. It is a reliable and tough workhorse movement. But like I said at the beginning, most of my love comes from the way this thing looks. The 60-click bakelite bezel looks just perfect. Not just because of the coke color scheme that complements the watch and gives it character, but the way it is built, with a transparent layer above the numerals that creates a similar effect we find on modern sapphire bezels, with the only difference being warmer light reflections on this, making it look even better, to be honest. Then the dial, matte black with impeccable printing and these amazing hour markers. They are truly a thing to behold. Containers of tritium held in place like gems are held on jewelry. They give a 3D look that no watch today can match. As a result of their height, the hands are pretty short, similar to what Seiko had to do on their kinetic tuna that I also reviewed. But unlike Seiko that placed the minute markers on the outer edge of the dial, so basically 10 feet away from the hands, making them look too short for accurate time reading, Bulova made a brilliant move of placing them on the inner side of the hour markers, so the hands, despite their obvious shortness, actually reach their designated markers, something you know I'm obsessed with. Also, to compensate for their shortness, hands are very wide, making the whole watch easily readable. Sadly, the tritium has long died, so the lume is pretty weak and basically unusable. But just imagine how well it must have glowed when the watch was new. Since everything on the dial is concentrated on the inner part, Bulova added a red line running around the hour markers to balance the look. And I have to admit it really works. Without it, the watch would look squished at the center, but this line really opens it up, and in combination with the red crosshair, gives the dial that special something. Another thing giving the watch that special something is the highly domed acrylic crystal with an inner cyclops for the date. I'm usually not a fan of cyclops, but on this, it is done in a brilliant way, because it is placed on the inside. If you ever owned a watch with a regular Rolex-style cyclops, you know how much dust gets caught on the edges, forcing you to wipe it off every couple of days. By placing the cyclops on the inside, Bulova eliminated that problem and made the crystal look better in my opinion. The last thing that makes this such a perfect watch to me is the size. With a diameter of 41 millimeters and a lug-to-lug of just under 44, it fits perfectly on my 6.7-inch wrist. It might seem too small to some, but the case shape, the bakelite bezel, and the unique dial give it a lot more wrist presence than the size would suggest. If, however, you still think this is too small, Bulova did make a reissue of this in 2018, increasing the size to 44 millimeters. But sadly, that model was made in quite the opposite way to this. While I get the feeling this was made with quality in mind, the reissue seems to have cost-cutting as the main driving force. So it doesn't come with an in-house made movement. In fact, it comes with one of the cheapest movements you can get today, a Miyota 8200. The cost-cutting doesn't stop there though, as they use the stamped clasp on the otherwise great bracelet. Now, I personally don't have anything against stamped clasps or the Miyota 8200 if they are priced correctly. Sadly, Bulova doesn't ask $200 for the reissue, which is a realistic price for what you get spec-wise. They don't even ask $300, which could be forgiven given the legendary design, a sapphire crystal, and a solid link bracelet. No, they ask $750 for the reissue, which is just insane, as you can get the original vintage piece in decent condition for that amount of money, and the vintage one is just a better watch. Even if we ignore the specs and create an equal level playing ground for both, it is enough to take a glance at the logo to see which one was made with passion and which one was made as a cash grab. The reissue has one of the worst logo applications ever put on a watch, with the connecting pieces usually outshining the letters of the logo itself. If we take a close look at the original, however, you will see that although they are made in the same way, Bulova went to the extra trouble of painting each connecting piece black to make it blend with the dial, making only the letters stand out. Even more impressive is the rumor that all the painting was done by hand. And if that is true, it makes for an even stronger argument that Bulova really gave its best with this model, which sadly can't be said for the reissue. As a watch collector, I will always have the original in my collection, as I just love everything about it, and really think this is one of the coolest looking dive watches ever made. Sadly, because it is a vintage watch, it will never come even close to water, despite that being its original purpose. For water activity, I was planning on getting the reissue, and maybe one day, if I can find one at a price closer to $200, I just might. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and until the next video, bye.